At first glance, coral looks like underwater rock, or maybe a strange kind of plant frozen in place. But coral is alive in a much more surprising way. It is an animal, and not just one animal, but usually a colony made of many tiny animals working together. These animals are called polyps. Each polyp is small, soft, and simple compared with fish or crabs, but together they can build structures large enough to shape entire coastlines. Coral belongs to the same broad animal group as jellyfish and sea anemones, which explains one of its hidden weapons, stinging cells. Even though coral may seem still and passive, every polyp is an active organism with a mouth, tentacles, and a role inside a much larger living system. A coral colony is made of many genetically identical polyps. You can think of it as a living community of clones, all connected by shared tissue and all contributing to the same structure. A single polyp is usually only a few millimeters wide and shaped like a tiny sac. Around its central mouth are tentacles that can sense and capture food. Near its base, the polyp secretes a hard outer skeleton made from calcium carbonate. This skeleton is not just protection. It is the foundation for future growth. When one generation of polyps builds, the next generation grows on top of that structure. Over time, layer by layer, the colony becomes much larger than any individual animal inside it. This is how reef-building coral changes the ocean floor. The animal itself is soft, but the skeleton it leaves behind is hard and durable. Across many generations, compact colonies can create branches, domes, plates, and massive reef frameworks. Different coral species build different shapes, and those shapes matter. Branching corals create hiding places for small fish. Massive rounded corals resist waves. Plate-like forms spread outward to capture light. What looks like a static underwater landscape is actually the long result of countless small biological actions. Each tiny polyp deposits material at its base, and the colony slowly turns chemistry from seawater into architecture. Coral can grow by asexual reproduction, which means new polyps form from existing polyps without needing a mate. This is how a colony expands while keeping the same genetic identity. A polyp can bud, creating another polyp beside it, and that new polyp begins contributing to the shared colony. This process allows a coral group to spread across its skeleton and increase in size. It is slow compared with the movement of animals we usually notice, but in reef time it is powerful. A colony may start from something tiny, then over years or decades become a large structure. Its growth is not a single dramatic event. It is patient repetition. Corals also reproduce sexually, and this can be one of the most synchronized events in the ocean. In many species, polyps release eggs and sperm into the water at nearly the same time, often at night and often around a full moon. This timing increases the chance that gametes from the same species meet in the open water. When fertilization happens, the result is a planula, a mobile early life stage of coral. The planula does not look like a reef. It drifts, swims, and searches for a suitable place to settle. If it finds the right surface and conditions, it attaches and begins transforming into a polyp. From there, a new colony can begin. Although coral polyps can catch food, many of the most famous reef-building corals rely heavily on an extraordinary partnership. Inside their tissues live microscopic algae-like organisms called zooxanthellae, from the genus Symbiodinium. These symbiotic cells use photosynthesis, capturing energy from sunlight and turning it into usable nutrients. The coral provides shelter and access to light. The zooxanthellae provide much of the energy the coral needs. This partnership is one reason many corals grow in clear, shallow tropical water. They are not simply sitting in sunlight by accident. Their internal partners need that light to power the colony. The colors we associate with coral reefs often come from this relationship. Zooxanthellae help give coral its brown, green, golden, or other living tones, while coral tissues and pigments can add more variation. But the color is not just decoration. It is a visible sign of a functioning biological alliance. The coral animal and its microscopic partners are exchanging benefits constantly. When conditions are stable, this system can be remarkably productive. It helps explain how reefs can flourish in tropical waters that are often relatively low in free-floating nutrients. The reef is not rich because the water is rich. It is rich because life there recycles energy and nutrients with extreme efficiency. Because many reef-building corals depend on photosynthesis, depth matters. Sunlight fades quickly as it passes through seawater, so these corals usually grow in clear, shallow areas, often less than about 60 meters deep. Some light-dependent corals can live deeper under special conditions, but the general rule is simple: less light means less energy for their symbiotic partners. This is why tropical reefs form in bright, transparent waters rather than in muddy, dark environments. The reef is shaped by biology, but also by physics. Light, water clarity, temperature, and chemistry all decide where coral can thrive and how fast it can build. Coral reefs are more than coral skeletons. Once coral creates structure, that structure becomes habitat. Cracks, branches, ledges, and tunnels provide shelter for fish, crustaceans, mollusks, worms, and countless other organisms. The reef becomes a city built by animals, inhabited by many species that use it for food, protection, breeding, and hunting. This is why coral is considered a major contributor to the physical structure of reef ecosystems. The coral builds the framework, and the ecosystem grows around it. Without the builders, many reef species would lose the complex three-dimensional environment they depend on. But the coral partnership is fragile under stress. When water becomes too warm, or when coral faces toxins or other damaging conditions, the polyps may expel their zooxanthellae. This is called bleaching. The coral turns pale because it has lost much of the color supplied by its symbiotic cells, and more importantly, it has lost a major energy source. Bleaching does not always mean immediate death, but it is a serious warning sign. If stressful conditions pass quickly, coral may recover. If stress continues, the weakened colony can starve, become diseased, or die. A bleached reef is not just less colorful. It is a system under biological strain. Not all corals live in bright tropical shallows. Some corals do not rely on zooxanthellae at all, which means they are not tied to sunlight in the same way. These corals can live in deep, cold, dark waters across the world. One example is Lophelia, a cold-water coral genus found at depths reaching thousands of meters. In places like the North Atlantic, off Scotland, near Washington State, and around the Aleutian Islands, corals can exist far from the postcard image of a tropical reef. These deep corals grow without photosynthetic partners, depending instead on food particles and small organisms carried through the water. So coral is not one simple thing. It is a tiny animal, a colony, a builder, a partner to microscopic life, and sometimes the foundation of an entire ecosystem. In shallow tropical seas, coral turns sunlight and seawater chemistry into reef structure. In deep oceans, other corals survive in darkness and cold, showing how adaptable this animal group can be. The most important idea is that coral's power comes from scale. One polyp is easy to overlook. Millions of polyps, growing over generations, can create habitats visible from above the ocean surface. Coral reminds us that some of the planet's biggest living structures are built by some of its smallest architects. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.